Okay, we will call the meeting to order. This is the Narberth Planning Commission meeting for December 1st, 2025. I'm Adam Crom, the chair. I will call roll. Order. So Ralph Fishball,
Here virtually.
Jen Priatko,
Here.
Heidi Boyce,
Here.
Brian Kinslow, here. Todd Bressie, here. David Greenberg, here. And Aaron Graves. Here. Okay. The agenda is available at the back of the room. Tonight's agenda includes the following. So we'll begin with our announcements and updates from the chair and from the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Then we will consider the minutes from November that were in your meeting packets that were distributed via email. We do not have a presentation tonight, so we'll go to the fourth agenda item, which is a discussion of our meeting dates for 2026 and what we will be working on for the coming calendar year so far. And then we will also have a discussion of the 4A zoning district and how it relates to housing development. After that, we'll take public comment. And of course, if anyone has any general topics to bring to the commission as well. And then we'll take a motion for adjournment. Okay, so I will start with the chair's report. I don't have that much except because we'll go through some of the things for next year on the discussion of the timeline. But one thing that is important is that was told that I haven't actually checked this myself, but that the code for the borough may have been changed to stipulate 5 members of the planning commission, but we currently have, I believe, 7 seated. And so I guess I'd be interested in taking the sense of the commissioners, what you feel the right number of planning commissioners are. I did get from many of you your professional qualifications to be on the commission, like different backgrounds and capabilities, so we can always remind everyone on council what your qualifications and what you bring to the commission are. But I guess I would be interested in hearing from those present what you think the right number of commissioners are.
I have a quick update on that.
Oh, okay.
Right before the meeting, it looks like that the ordinance will be revised to basically repeal the ordinance that made planning commission members 5. So I believe it's council's intention to keep planning at 7.
Okay. So maybe we don't need to discuss it. But I think that I talked to a few people, and I think there is a sense that 7 is a good number. It helps us cover any absences. We have to have an alternate, and also gives us a wider range of perspectives. So, okay. Why don't we go to? Are there any questions for me? Why don't we go to Montgomery County Planning Commission?
Yeah, so a little bit of a lighter update from myself as well, but we're working on recodification still, and this week actually we'll be meeting as kind of like a smaller working group to see everybody's feedback, and Michael's Amy has already provided feedback, but right now Kevin's going through the code and working through it, as is Maggie. So we'll have some feedback, and then Todd and I will incorporate that feedback, have kind of a more final draft to present to you in January. So that's what's going on with zoning notification. Other items include the active transportation plan, which we're finishing up as for both Narberth and Lower Marion. So that should be finished by the new year. And we'll be getting some public comment on that as well. And then just for myself with Narberth, I'm just working on really evaluating kind of affordable housing options here, taking a look at code, taking a look at, safe on site, and I'll be providing you guys with a memo, in February. So those are things that I'm working on. I was trying to get a speaker for this evening, but it was kind of on short notice. But I will be just incorporating a lot of feedback that I get from research into my memo. So I'm speaking with the Affordable Housing Director of Montgomery County, the Redevelopment Authority at the county, and others involved. And there's also a plan, I don't want to steal Adam Cron's thunder, but there's a tentative plan to have like an affordable housing open house in late February, but dates have not been decided. So that's just an update on what I'm working on. Any questions?
So when you
Yeah.
said you were hoping to have a presenter, that would be one of the people that you just mentioned.
Yeah, I also reached out to a couple of developers, but again, this was kind of asked to be, like 2 weeks ago. And with Thanksgiving, it was hard. I could have had someone that got back to me at 3 o'clock today, but I didn't, appropriate topic.
Okay. But specifically to talk about affordable housing.
Specifically, yes.
Okay. So the third item on the agenda, or the second item on the agenda is consideration of the November meeting minutes. Would anyone like to edit the minutes at all? Will there be any changes?
I have 2 questions about the minutes. The first is under the Montgomery County Planning Commission update. It refers to MCPC as working with Montgomery Township on their transportation plan. Isn't that also, is that supposed to reference the?
It's a joint
Is it
transportation.
joint active?
Yes, it's an active transportation plan, it's joint. Development.
So I'd like to suggest we amend the minutes to correct that. And then, secondly, on the last page, the resolution that we proposed to count, where we proposed changes to the 5B district to council. Number 5 says allow off-street parking within 900 feet of the development site to satisfy the parking requirements. I don't know if it's material or not, but I think we discussed that in the context of current provisions that allow for there to be shared parking, which requires, certain kinds of easements and documentation, and that shared parking be expanded, not just to adjacent properties, but to 900 feet. So I think maybe a little nuance got lost there. I'm sure it would be addressed later, but if others feel that way, maybe that nuance should be included. That it's really an extension of the existing shared parking requirement for adjacent properties to 900 feet. Provided the other conditions of shared parking in that. I think that's what the spirit of that conversation was. So those are 2 things I'd like to propose we revise.
Discussion?
That's fine.
Second point, I think the intent was, we have to review the tape, remember. Discuss, but the intent was not to change the shared parking. Shared parking is a calculation that allows the same parking space to count towards both commercial parking space as well as a residential parking space, or two different land uses to receive at least a fractional credit for the space, so it can lower cumulative parking requirement of the development program. But you still have to have a certain number of spaces. So I think the idea was that when you determine the minimum number of spaces for residential development, that you could satisfy that across more than one parcel within 900 feet.
Trying to look up. Yeah, you're probably right about that, that's not the exact term. Trying to look up what the exact term is. Should reorganize this thing. There's parking, parking, off-street parking that's shared by two or more uses.
And there's a calculation, I think, that results in savings.
Well, you see, here the code is ambiguous. And this actually may be a little glitch. It says parking spaces may be shared among uses in the same or adjoining lots according to the standards of shared parking. So I think it sort of right now the code sort of combines the two ideas in a way. So I think you're right then. I think the idea is not necessarily obviously if parking is 900 feet away, it doesn't have to be part of the shared parking. But there are requirements when you have those kinds of arrangements for things like easements and so forth, which should be part of the recommendation, I think, even if it's technically not. It's something slightly different from what we call shared parking, right? So anyway,
Why don't we add that to the minutes for this meeting?
okay, that's fine.
And if in fact council does make any changes to the parking rules, then we can add that as a recommendation.
That makes sense.
So Todd has suggested, just made a correction under the section 1B that MCPC is working on the Lower Marion Narberth Joint Active Transportation Plan. So it covers Narberth and Lower Marion, but it's only their active transportation plan. So are there any other corrections? And would someone like to make a motion to adopt the November meeting minutes or approve them?
I'll make the motion. Approve the minutes, amendment.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded to approve the meeting minutes as amended. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, adopted by unanimous vote. Item 3 is skipped. Item 4 is the discussion of the 2026 calendar and timeline. So in your meeting packet after the minutes is a list of all of our proposed meeting dates. So they're all on Monday, January 5th, February 2nd, March 2nd, April 6th, May 4th, June 1st, July 6th, August 3rd, which traditionally, well, I guess they have August 3rd still listed, and then September is canceled. And then October 5th, November 2nd, and December 7th.
September's not canceled. It's just a week or two later because of Labor Day. Labor Day kind of messed up all the meetings.
Okay, so it's September 14th, is that sound?
Yes.
September 14th. So we have the August 3rd meeting reserved in case we do want to meet. But if we don't have enough business, we would cancel, I think, August. September 14th, thank you. Is there any discussion about does anyone see a problem with the meeting dates? Okay, So the roughly what we're working on, tonight we can continue to discuss the 4A zoning district. And we'll continue to discuss housing, I guess, until as long as necessary, or in January, we will be reviewing the,
That is the plan, depending on how many edits and corrections the team has. But our goal is to have the final document as final as possible in January for you to review.
okay, so the recodification of the zoning code will be with the commission in January. To sort of recommend, I guess, or comment on before it goes to council, ultimately to be adopted potentially. So that's a lot of work on that. Now, there may be some discussion about while they're under the hood for the zoning code, should there be any minor technical changes to the zoning code? Like there's sort of, like, some of them, like, true corrections could just be corrections to the base zoning, and then minor changes could be, I guess, a parallel or second bill that would make a correction or a change to the zoning.
That's a question about the schedule. It feels a little aggressive to me in the sense that, the intent is for council to authorize advertisement of the ordinance in January. So the steps we have to go through, we have to receive feedback. There are a lot of corrections that still need to be made. But the big question mark, and maybe you have info on this, Emily, is what the solicitor thinks it will take to prepare this into actually an ordinance. If according to this schedule, we would actually have solicitors draft by January, I would think. That's what it implies to me. If council essentially, 2 weeks later is gonna authorize advertising of it. So that, it feels like there's too many steps to be able to advertise in January. Do you have more info though on what the solicitor is thinking, or what this solicitor anticipates it will take?
I mean, based on the review of the recodification, it is council's hope that they would be able to authorize advertisement in January. What do you think would be, in your view, a more realistic timeline for recodification?
Well, that's why I asked you what the solicitor's thinking is, because I don't want to get ahead of whatever he's thinking, but I would think February would be more realistic if we're actually talking about advertising. I mean, I know that even the smallest zoning amendments have taken a bit of time, a bit of back and forth. I imagine, again, I don't want to presuppose how the solicitor will approach this, but I imagine he'll want to read this very carefully, which I can't really imagine will take a bit of time. So anyway, I would say February may be realistic. Not that that would change the pace of our work. It's just more that building in time for the solicitor to prepare the ordinance. I suspect it'll take a little longer. I think we could potentially have a final draft in January.
Yeah.
Potentially. So it wouldn't actually change what you do or what I do. It would just mean we may need to build in more time for the solicitor's preparation.
All right, so that's a question really for the solicitor and the borough staff about the schedule for ultimately consideration of an ordinance by council. Right? Well, we can look at, you think, the code in January.
Yes.
And I don't know that we will ever need to see the ordinance either, so.
I think it's just sort of a protocol step. But you're correct.
As long as
We
it
could bring
pertains
the
to code, yeah.
edited version to the commission record.
Okay. So January, is the code, and we can continue to discuss, you know, if we get any, obviously, land development proposals, they will be considered as they come in. The we may also spend some time again on housing, preparing for the February meeting. Because at some point in February, after our meeting, I think the intent is to potentially hold a town hall workshop covering planning topics, including the zoning adjustments, but we'll see if it could also include other things like the transportation plan or the Montgomery Avenue corridor study or anything else that might be synergistic.
We do have a potential date for that. So we are looking at February 26th. It's a Thursday. If that also works for the planning commission.
Well, is there a problem with the microphone because we're getting some feedback?
Oh, no, it's picking up.
Sorry. Let's see what the problem was. So February 26th. What day of the week is that again?
It's a Thursday.
Okay. So I think we'll discuss, further, how that will be run and facilitated, but I think the intent is to have essentially, drop-in workstations that people can chat with. We'll perhaps, put together an agenda or a content, discussion, so strategize about how to run it. But if, planning commissioners would participate. So we would want to be getting ready in January, February for that. We will continue to discuss the zoning code for the rest of the zoning districts through the first quarter of the year. For any revisions for things like missing middle housing or affordable housing. And we will also take consideration of any land development proposals that do come in. So we are expecting some in the spring, but who knows? But so that will be part of the time. And then so we'll send any recommendations and feedback from the town hall and our work in the first part of the quarter to council, at some point in the spring. Also, in March, under state laws, we're normally, I think that's the month that we submit our annual report as a planning commission. I have to check. I think it's due in March, which means that it probably needs to be, if we're going to have any discussion of it, that would also have to be discussed in February. So perhaps we should have a subcommittee to author that report. Would anyone like to step forward to lead that committee?
Was there one done last year?
No.
Yes, by March 1st.
Yeah, so the draft would have to be sort of discussed and finalized in February.
How does that normally work here for you guys for your annual report?
Let's move on from that.
I don't think we've ever done.
I
Okay.
wrote one once.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like,
Someone from the staff informed me when I was chair that
Okay.
this was a duty. And I looked it up and sure enough, I found it's either in the borough or the state code. So I just wrote like a one-page memo.
Okay.
And we looked at it at one meeting and then we sent off. It wasn't a big deal.
Okay. That sounds about right. Yeah.
One-page synopsis.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at all our agendas to make sure I didn't forget anything.
I can help with that.
Yeah, it's really just means looking at the agendas. So here's the topics we discussed, here's the things we voted on, and
We have all our meeting notes.
I'll look at yours and.
if anyone can find it, it's on the webpage somewhere, but I don't remember. If I find it, I'll send it to you.
I can work on it, yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we'll, you know, I might follow up with you just to make sure we're on track, but that report would be brought to the full commission, I guess, February, just to make sure we have a chance to see it. Again, it be set March 1st, by March 1st, on March 1st, whatever. Okay, doesn't have to be one page, I mean, we've got a lot, we've been busy. So, we, basically takes us to the summer with our agenda, and then we don't, have a defined agenda, beyond that for the rest of the year. Are there any topics that we want to make sure that we propose that we may want to cover as the commission in the summer? I mean, we may continue to work on zoning or not, it's to be determined. As you know, it takes, as we've discussed, it's quite a time consuming process, but
I suspect there will be some desire to do some level of amendments to the code, for example. Reevaluating which things are currently conditional uses and whether they need to be. Conversely, if they need to be, do we have the proper criteria? That's pretty sloppy in the code right now. Same is true with special exceptions. We have a lot of different ways of managing things. We have special exceptions, we have conditional uses, we have distance regulation, all these things. And I think probably I would expect that there will be a desire to simplify all that. I think another big topic, potentially, which I'll just throw out to see if it makes sense, is there's been discussion about how to handle things that are more design related. Do they really belong to zoning? Could they go to Saldo? Is there a way to create guidelines? No, we care a lot about the design of things, but zoning is not always the best tool for that. So is there a better way to do that? That may be a matter that is surfaced by the recodification as well. So I think a couple of big things like that. I think next tier down, an important issue we may want to consider for our agenda is how we handle non-conforming uses, or how we handle the interplay between the historic district ordinance, the historic district process, and the zoning process, because essentially by preventing demolitions, we've thrown a lot of property owners into the need to expand their houses, which I think is a good thing, but that has created a lot of conflicts with the code because they may have houses that are already non-conforming in certain ways, and they're, you know, we run into a lot of complications that are handled by emergency zoning changes or, you know, good faith zoning interpretations by the zoning officer, but we're kind of putting them on the spot to do that. So I think that's another issue we may want to look at, is how we handle non-conforming uses, particularly the interplay with historic district. So I think there are a few things like that that might surface that could become priorities for zoning amendments. They're not so much, you know, about density and affordable housing. There's more about making sure we have a clean code that helps things that we want to happen move forward.
Okay, so we're already covering density and affordable housing. That's one of our main topics. Because I think, you know, it has that concern, you know, it comes down to zoning regarding multi-family housing, where it's allowed, cottages, smaller units, setbacks. I think we should just do broad, and maybe this will come up with your presenters from the FEC. But
Yeah.
Did you go to the conference at It was in Wayne.
I did not.
Because that addressed a lot of very interesting topics.
Yeah.
Also, are we going to bring up the subject of Montgomery Avenue corridor and also the Haverford Avenue corridor and the stores? I mean, it seems that, I know that's on Borough Council's agenda, but should Planning Commission weigh in on recommendations or at least participate in recommendations for what that should look like?
I think so. I mean, I don't think I've seen a formal calendar for that study. Have we?
No, not for the Montgomery border staff study, no.
I mean, so far that process seems to have been that the brief the elected officials first. And then widen out to the public, and we're considered the public. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's kind of the way it's going. So, yeah, I mean, I think that,
I mean, that kind of combines with what Todd's suggesting too, with the design side of things, because it's not purely zoning criteria, it also has some aesthetic criteria and functioning and community. I mean, there's a lot of aspects of it.
yeah, I mean, to put it as a comparison, right? Other states have other enabling law that we don't have, and so they'll have things like specific area plans that would control things like architecture, character, and then I had suggested that for the Montgomery Avenue study, ideally we would have a charrette for our section that would be kind of an urban design charrette, so that it would be considering the transportation elements, but also considering, you know, what are the opportunities for revitalization, development. Make sure we also capture the streetscape issues, so it's not just about vehicular movement, but you know, there's discussion of whether we should be applying for grants for new streetlights or things like that, right? So,
And it would be really great if we could dig up the old studies that have been done. I mean, there've been several studies done on it. I mean, what do you do? Drawings. That would be really nice to say, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
yeah, so I mean, we can recommend, continue to recommend that, you know, we be consulted on the corridor study. Which would probably also be in the spring. And I guess, and the, we'll say, or I guess it could be the winter, January, February would be winter. And then, for Haverford Avenue, yeah, I don't, well, I guess, depending on how things go, you know, perhaps we could add, you know, suggest whether council wanted to take that on as a strategy, alternative strategies. I think, I mean, I don't know if we might even ask the developer to come give us a status update. Where at maybe to borough councils would accomplish the same thing.
Right.
But to sort of a check-in and level set, I think that there may be some opportunity to do that again in the next couple of weeks or months. I think then the question about like what next kind of depends on what that update is, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, do you know anything that's been going on with it?
No, I have nothing except,
I mean, that would be really helpful. We should ask borough council.
yeah, because we don't want to start like rumors that aren't founded on something. But with that said, I personally been thinking a lot about what makes sense in a changing retail environment. And for example, is that from a retail perspective, is the focus need to be on either experiential things or not I think we could focus more, for example, on maker spaces or arts. I kicked around, at a meeting, like, wouldn't it be great if we had our own clay pottery studio that we could have a gallery, we could have a kiln, we could have other maker spaces and so on, but like basically to get uses in there that would animate the street and be synergistic with the other businesses.
Creative solutions.
Right. It just is a reminder too, like when I talked to somebody from the business association, it's like, we have the construction of the bridge and ideally, we wouldn't, when the bridge is complete, that would be the end of construction and we could celebrate and relax as opposed to continuous construction projects or whatnot. So, try to sort of get downtown finished. All right, so we can pass along a reminder about the commercial districts and the Montgomery Avenue study. I also wanted to add for the zoning discussion and for housing and development, one of the topics that I continue to sort of think that we could explore, whether there's there is what other states call planned unit development, what Pennsylvania I think calls planned residential development districts. Which is basically the idea that you have an overlay zone that is a conditional land use or conditional zoning, essentially, that is entirely conditional, so your base zoning doesn't change. But that through a process of approval by the municipality, you can approve alternate setbacks, alternate densities, alternate heights, those kinds of essentially even alternate uses. But that the burden is on the applicant to be compatible with the general plan and adjacent land uses and so on. The reason to consider that kind of an approach is that it helps deal with irregular sites that don't have clear or same kind of sort of square setbacks front side or may get you the architectural result you're looking for because you negotiate for the architectural element in exchange for, say, density. I'll give you an example, like over Thanksgiving, I was with my family and my extended family includes people from Washington State and their little small town, which is probably the same population as ours, possibly smaller, has the PUD zone and what it basically sets all kinds of limits on what you can do in the sense that it says you can have a higher density but not more than twice the base zoning, things like that. But that means that say on a parcel that you could subdivide for 3 single houses with the ADUs, that's 6 possible housing units in the base zoning. Under a PUD, potentially you could get 12 units on the same parcel and potentially like a condominium or something. So rather than zone for that larger building, in order to get the larger building, you have to prove that it's compatible with the neighborhood and so on. I think there are examples of this in Pennsylvania, but again, one of the things we could try to do is get some precedents and or research, perhaps some legal papers and so on. Okay, so I don't know, and then we can wait and see how far we get by the summer and what the will of council is beyond the summer.
To your point about downtown, and just things that we could actually address in zoning that would help. And where retail is going. So a lot of experiential uses are prohibited on Haverford Avenue or in Arbor. So breweries, wineries, distilleries. We were talking about these kind of like maker spaces. I think we have to look at the definitions. Like what a studio would permit in terms of like training. Like right now, if you had a craft studio, I don't think you would be able to have like a class of people for the code. So taking a look at all these different types of uses and ensuring that, there are what people want to do, even like recreational indoor uses, so escape rooms, that type of thing, there's nothing in the code that would permit that. So take a look at that.
Is it prohibited by the code, do you know?
Well, I just know that for like studios, and this has been recommended in the past, you couldn't have like a training class, like if you have a craft studio or a dance studio or something like that, yoga. And maybe there are folks that are doing this right now, but, we just want to expand the code to make it more feasible to do these different types of things. But yeah, I don't think these are explicitly stated in the code right now.
A studio, yeah, there's a definition of a studio.
The current definition of a studio,
Oh, it is, it says it's a place where crafts are made or sold or classes are taught.
see,
So if the studio is allowed,
yeah, so it says fine art, craft. I think about manufactured and sold to customers. But you would also want that to be produced, you want to incorporate, music, film, different artistic crafts, you would just want to expand it.
also it does, the definition includes training as well.
Doesn't? I didn't think that was adopted.
This is printed out from the codified ordinance.
They're not currently permitted on the ground floor though. The frontage is on Haverford.
Studios
Yeah,
are
just
not
looking
on
at the
North Fork.
definition.
Okay, so
They're
that's an
permitted
example
on
where the
Haverford, but they're not.
right, so we have
on the ground.
single story retail buildings, and so they wouldn't be permitted. Unless we change that to what's allowed on the ground floor. Which, I mean, would obviously would require some further discussion, but
Well, yeah, the studio is permitted in a commercial building, 5A. Commercial buildings by definition are one story. So.
What?
Well, anyway, I mean, it's a good point. On the other hand, I think we'd be getting feedback pretty loud and clear if there was a property owner who had a use that wasn't allowed in the code. I mean, I think we would hear that pretty fast. So, but nevertheless, I think it's a good exercise to make sure that the code is allowing the kinds of things that are likely to create a lively street, not just no glitches or things that are left out because the code was written 20 years ago and things have changed. I think we did try to talk about link road roofs in the past and never quite came to a resolution about that. So, there's certainly more to it, but I honestly don't think the code is the issue.
right, so I mean, maybe just more about the strategy and, engagement, anything the borough can do to support the vitality of the downtown. And I think the first step would be hearing from the property owner, most of the neighboring properties. Anything else people want to suggest for the annual agenda? Okay, well, we'll have a chance to continue setting the agenda as we go forward. So there doesn't seem to be any problem with the proposed dates. We are going to be fairly busy in January, February, March. So we'll move on to the agenda item 4B, which is the 4A zoning district. So I'm going to do a couple things. One is I will, remind everybody of where it is. So,
You might have to send a request.
okay, so this is the zoning map of the borough. And this green area, this dark purple is the downtown core. 5A, right? and the green collar around downtown and extending up Haverford and Windsor to Iona is 4A, which is a sort of a mid-density residential, basically, and like a transitional residential density. 4B is this blue color. And so you'll notice that 4B has more mixed use than 4A, or I guess I should say sort of more commercial property allowed. And then and perhaps the most important difference for form is that 4B includes row houses, which are defined in the code, and 4A does not allow row houses, but only twins and a multifamily house, I think. So within 4A, there are very few vacant parcels and non-historic parcels. There are some non-historic buildings, some apartment buildings on Haverford and Windsor that are not historic, but are also totally viable properties, if not necessarily proposed for any redevelopment. There are a few smaller houses too, or homes that could potentially, I guess, be developed to a slightly higher density. But none. You can see the parcels for the most part are relatively small. They are sort of large house lots. So sometimes they have multi-family structures on them with 2 or 3 units in them, but generally not any more than that. There is one exception: the former Baptist Church at Elmwood Avenue and Narberth Avenue was demolished and is one of the largest vacant sites actually in the borough that is available for development. And of course, the owner has expressed an interest in developing the parcel. So that's 198 Elmwood. At the last meeting, it was asked. So there was a previous, I guess, development proposal approved. That was actually before I was on the commission for this property. But the permission has lapsed, and it's not the original plan as originally proposed and approved no longer complies with the zoning code. So I was asked to summarize what specifically is not compliant. So I'll bring up the original plans from 2017, just so you can see them. So if we share this, so this is the survey when the church was on the parcel, and I think what's important about this is that there's a couple of interesting things about this. First is the church was built right up to the rear. We'll call this the rear lot line. It's sort of a side lot line on Narberth Avenue, but the church essentially was built right up to it. It was not really set back at all from that parcel line. And it's built pretty close to the Narberth Avenue parcel line. It's 7 feet off of the property line at its closest approach. It's further from Elmwood Avenue. It's about 25 feet from the property line, more. It's not exactly on that dimension, but it had a pretty large setback along Elmwood and a very small setback on Narberth, and essentially no setback on the rear. But the church is gone, and so what was proposed instead is an apartment building that looks like this. And you can see it's centered in the center of the lot, and that is to comply with all of the setback requirements. And it has a driveway that circumnavigates the building. Again, that's to comply with the zoning one-way driveway rule in this zoning district. The site is sloped, and I'll show you some diagrams in a moment about that. But at its it's about 299 feet at the corner of, Narberth and Elmwood, maybe even close to 300 feet. And it will potentially be 3 feet higher at the end of the bridge project, or a couple feet higher. I think they're raising the street there. I'm not 100% sure. I don't have a grading plan for the new street, but I think there is some change happening there. And then at the lower end, it's 11 feet lower. It's 288 feet. You know, at maybe even a little bit lower at the corner of the property. So it drops about 11 feet from along Elmwood. It's a little bit flatter towards the rear, but it drops another couple of feet to the lowest part of the lot, which is the interior corner. And this matters because the height limit is governed by an average of the perimeter, and in the old zoning code, you measured the topography where you were building and determined the average height of the line. But in the new zoning code, you measure the lot line and determine the average height of the lot line. So as a practical matter, on a sloped site, if you're trying to site your building kind of above the runoff and the water, and you're trying to be accessible to the sidewalk and so on, you may site the building at the higher end of the lot, which will then reduce the height that you can build to. So we'll cover that in a minute. But this was the plan that was approved for, I believe, 20 residential units. They were small units. And there are 10 spaces in a garage inside the building. They're kind of tricky to get into, but and then there's some exterior spaces. So what has changed? The key issues are that, so originally apartments were a permitted use in 4A, they are now a conditional use. But they could be approved with conditions. Apparently we require a dedication of recreational land in 4A. I don't really have my head wrapped around exactly what's required, but that's the change. So there's some kind of dedication now that's required for the conditional use. The front yard now requires an additional 10-foot setback on Narberth Avenue that is more than what the original plan was, I guess. Not sure why, but because it seems like it's 25 feet, but that's what the property owner's engineer says. I have the letters of review. The parking requirements added 2 spaces for visitors that they don't have a space to provide. The building height was reduced. The effective height of this plan was reduced by 4 feet, so that doesn't fit anymore on the height side. And then the driveway is a problem with the impervious coverage and the amount of driveway and the general arrangement of it. So I think they might be having a problem with the impervious coverage. I'm not sure. So that's the issue with the original plan. I'm also a little bit skeptical about this plan, but it was approved in the past. But it doesn't really have any. No one's proposing to build this today. But those are the reasons why it doesn't work. I did prepare some drawings to sort of just visualize this issue with the height. So like, I mean, basically, this is kind of how I think this is a crude drawing, but how the building was massed, and essentially the dark line is the actual lot today. The building is kind of entrance is kind of at slightly above street grade, like 1 foot higher than street grade. and then it's up on a berm, if you will, and that also allows for the parking garage underneath the building that you saw, taking advantage of the falling slope to make it more feasible to build. But the net effect of it is that they don't have 3 stories of height. Again, because they calculated lot line as elevation 291. So 35 feet above that doesn't, whereas they're building from essentially 300 up. So they just don't have they're like 4 or 5 feet short of what they need. It does seem like a disadvantage to me because in particular, the slope site is ideal for putting the parking under the building. But if you lower the building down, now you're excavating into the ground for the parking. Okay, so this is, yeah, so you can see on the screen, like, this would be like the maximum use case if you were to revise the zoning and add a density bonus. So this is just a visualization of the difference where, if you, again, allowed 3 stories from the highest point on the lot, this is how big the building is. But that's again, how you get your garage under the building. And then if you add a 4-story, with any setbacks for affordable housing, like as a density bonus, then you get into the bigger building. But when Jason Duckworth, the developer, came in to talk about his media apartment building, the only reason that they were able to build so many apartments was because the parking was tucked into the hillside. It had the same condition where, well, in his case, the road that they were building on, the street, the slope fell away from the street behind it. And so they tucked all the parking into the back. And then I think there's even some above grade structure. It's like a garage behind the building, but they essentially got an extra level or 2 of parking out of the site for less money because of the terrain. But so that is the issue in a nutshell for why the old plan doesn't work with the zoning. So I guess we put on the table. I guess we can just go around the table and discuss if people have suggestions for anything about 4A that they want to put in the hopper for discussion on any potential changes related to housing. Maybe start with Jennifer.
I have the code open to review and my computer froze, so I can't. I mean, I think, as far as the definition of the height of the establishment of the height of a building, like universally in Norberg, the slopes can be challenging if we're looking to maximize building densities. Taking the average, I don't know, it would be an interesting thing to review on other parcels as well, but I agree with the analysis on for 4A with the sheet.
I mean, so what? Any thoughts on what to do about the height and slope sites, or
That's what I'm trying to, but I feel like the standard is sort of median slope, median grade point across the property. The 2 options are either change the definition so it's taken from a different point, instead of the average, or we increase the minimum, the building height baseline so that if other projects can work, I'm trying.
Well, put another way, you could say, we're not gonna change how you calculate the base elevation, but we could change the height your building is allowed to be
Yes,
and not change the stories. So in other words, we could say a 3-story building could be allowed 45 feet of height from the base elevation, recognizing that the base elevation is lower than the highest point on the lot for a slope site. Potentially significantly lower.
I think we just have to be careful about how we approach what that number is, because it could turn into the same conversation we ended up having on Montgomery Avenue, where the allowable building height could afford to have another floor within that building height.
Well, we could potentially, we could, I suppose, differentiate flat sites from slope sites.
That would probably, we'd have to define what we consider a slope.
It's like if the difference between your average value and your highest value is more than a certain amount or something. I don't know, yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
I'm trying to think what that would be though. We would have to be able to take the grades across multiple properties, compare, to come up with a definition that works.
I don't have an answer back for context. The change you were referring to, I'm pretty sure it occurred before we had the historic district in place. There were 2 concerns. One concern was trying to do what we could to minimize tear downs. Now, I'm saying these were the concerns then, things changed, but then we were trying to think of what we could do to minimize tear downs. And secondly, we were concerned about the potential for buildings to tower over their neighbors, to be very jarring juxtapositions of heights because of concern for the quality of the neighbors around. Those are the concerns that led to the change that you flagged, right? Now, I'm not posing that as an argument, I'm just posing that as context for everyone. The historic district ordinance changed a lot because it essentially prevented a lot of tear downs. And so doing things like raising building heights, that may change the economics of development, but you still have the historic district ordinance in place to protect large areas of the borough from tear downs. In terms of the other issue, which is having buildings that are in kind of a jarring height juxtaposition to their neighbors, that's more of a question to discuss, right? So like in your cross section, you didn't show the house next door. That's what the planning commission is concerned about. So I just offer that as a little bit of context for everyone else, as to how decision making happened in the past and why things are the way they are. Is that how you remember?
Absolutely.
The conditional use that was added. The district, because I don't believe there are standards other than,
Yeah, I'm scratching my head about that a little bit, and also the blue one, scratching my head, and also about that 25-foot thing that you fly back. I can't recall when and where that was introduced and why. I have no recollection of one side of it would be so big. I really have to
Right.
do forensics to figure that one out. So all I can say about the apartment buildings is it's a time. There was a time when it was thought that while it may be appropriate in one apartment buildings in certain places, because of their nature, they required extra scrutiny. That's the conditional use. You're right, there may not be, maybe puzzling with our conditions applied. I referred to that earlier in the meeting, saying that's sort of a kind of a quirk of our code that maybe we need to be evaluated in general. But that was the reason why apartment buildings became conditional use, because it was felt by the planning commission at the time that while they may be desirable, they require certain scrutiny to ensure that any concerns from neighbors would be had ample opportunity to be addressed by council. I mean, conditional use does not, while it is a little bit of an extra step, it's not a step that is a significant preventative step. It's just a step that requires more scrutiny. The development needs conditions, council has to approve it. So it was mostly a matter of thinking that the buildings needed more scrutiny. Accurate.
Yeah,
I have a,
yep. It's important steps.
an additional question. If the general intent of 4A and 4, I'm gonna add in 4B just for a second because it's relevant to the question. Is that they're, 4B is adjacent to the Montgomery Ave, and then 4A is adjacent to Haverford. Is there any reasoning why the codes are different? Like 4B allows for row homes, and then some of the lots dimensions and sizes are smaller that are allowed, and side yards are smaller, and overall dimensions are
It's
smaller.
based on the existing code. Most of the form zoning code was taking into consideration the existing code.
Is there any thought of, well, what do people think about having the 4A incorporate more similar elements to 4B? Like allowing smaller lots or allowing, well, let's start with allowing row houses. And or townhouses.
I don't see anything wrong with that. If we're talking about, still talking about the Elmwood property, I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, I think the other important thing is that they can't just tear buildings down and build a bunch of row houses. So we're looking at a special condition for that lot.
I think in general, any of the 4A where you could build new, I don't have an issue with putting a townhouse.
In other words, if you can get a building permit to build something, a
Right.
townhouse would be allowable.
Well, so we don't even have a townhouse.
Well, yeah, we,
Row house and
Right.
townhouse, so it's very different.
yeah,
I mean, I think I'd be careful about wanting townhouses. I think that the closest we've come to townhouses are in Price Avenue, site where the church is. Those
How do you distinguish between townhouse and row house?
townhouses are bigger. There are a lot of them in.
what about
parts
our,
of Lower Merion
the,
that you built. They-
behind Narbrook Park on,
Those are are those
That's very expensive.
duplexes though?
Those are 3 structures, each structure has.
So they're
3
like
units.
townhouses, yeah. Yeah. They are, so we do have that type,
well, that's before this code.
yeah. Yeah. The question is whether that makes sense though, if we're looking for affordability. Because those tend to be big and not. I would think. I mean, it's a big difference between that and a row house, which is, I always imagine to be smaller and that's square foot per unit.
So at a minimum, would you reckon, would allow, support allowing row houses as a type in
Yeah.
4A,
Definitely.
which is an existing.
Which is an existing type. And it's really interesting, do we define row house? How do we define row house? Is it by size?
No. Attached,
Just an attached,
Single family
Oh.
dwelling that shares one or two vertical parting walls. On a lot line with another dwelling of the same type along the primary frontage line. And a group of such dwellings numbering no less than 3. Minimum of 3,
Because otherwise you want a twin, yes.
otherwise it's twin, yeah. But there's nothing dimensional about it. The
Yeah.
only dimensions we have for row houses are minimums, not maximums.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the
The
row house
minimum
work
lot.
could
Could-
morph into it, like
In
you're
all different
describing as a
things,
town-
yeah.
townhouse.
At a townhouse, yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage smaller ones?
Well, we also, so there's a corollary too, which is the lot size and lot width. Right, so if you want a small row house, you need to allow lots as narrow as 16 feet.
Right.
Which is 14 is the lot width and 4 feet.
Or yeah, if you want,
Yeah.
want
Which
to go
is-
smaller,
Small.
that's,
I don't think anybody does that anymore. You can, but
yeah, well, I mean, you could leave it up to the
Yeah.
builder, I suppose.
for sure.
But you would either, you need a narrower lot, minimum lot, and then a lesser footprint.
Mhm.
You know,
But under that definition, you wouldn't be able to stack multiple, like have a stacked townhouse with up to
You couldn't do a duplex
exact.
town like unit.
Right, we don't have that.
Because you can do a duplex as a row home technically, but because there's
you can have 2 units stacked.
Can you?
In our code,
Yeah.
is a type of house.
Yeah, because the detached house actually allows for second unit within it.
Yeah, but would a row house allow for a duplex?
I'd have to double check.
I mean, I think we should. I mean, that would be nice.
Because if it says a row of singles family homes,
Exactly.
then you would have to say
Share a one party wall.
or a row of duplex, you know, or like a row house could be one or two
Right.
units.
Well, one of the things I would add to this is, one thing we learned on Dudley when that there's a house kind of a lot and a house should bring it in there. It's that cottages aren't allowed in the 4A. We only allow them 3A, 3B, and 3C. So one thing, if we're looking at 4A, is we may want to allow cottages in the 4A. We may, I think in general, want to consider, they're right now only allowed in certain conditions in the H zone. So we should just basically allow them generally. And one of the interesting things about the cottage is I don't believe we have a minimum lot width or frontage size for a cottage. You can build it as small if you want. We could also do the same thing for flats. Figuring the people who build houses and sell them know how wide they need to, or narrow they need to make it, right? So I think for cottages, we eliminated the frontage rules. Just say build a cottage, make it as narrow as you want. And that was purposeful to the whole point of those particular code changes were allow people at historic houses who can no longer tear them down, create additional housing units. We don't give them tools to do that. So there's a lot of flexibility. So I'd suggest carrying that into 4A. I'd suggest making it as right, not just a special provision in the H district, but I'd propose applying the same width rules to row houses or even twins. I mean,
Well, there's a big difference between twins and rows because the side yard requirements result in the 14 feet between twins. It's a 7-foot minimum
right,
setback and 14 cumulative minimum.
right, but we wouldn't care how wide the actual twin was. If the builder wanted to build I mean, now I think it's a 25-foot minimum generally and a 22 wide minimum in the H district. If the builder wanted to build a 20-foot wide twin, why would we be concerned with that?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that the rows can skip the 14 feet between,
Sure, they don't have the side yard requirements unless they're hindered.
right?
So I feel like all those provisions that were kind of tested in the H district could be solidified. I mean, in the 3A, 3B, 3C could be solidified and brought into 4A at least. And then not, and their applicability, why?
Okay, so, let me see if I summarize this correctly. So a concept is to allow cottages and row houses as types. And for twins, cottages, and rows to eliminate the minimum frontage lot width.
Lot width and building, width. Don't get rid of the side yard, but
Right, so we eliminate the minimum widths, and then, are you also comfortable with reducing the lot sizes to maybe match 4B? Or minimum lot size in 4B is, I think,
For detached, they're the same. For twins, it's,
2,000 square feet.
sorry, I was looking at the ones.
And for row houses, it's 1,400 square feet.
generally. I mean, this is an example of where our code prevents people from building things small.
Yeah, well, 4A doesn't even comply with those minimums, by the way. The lots are smaller than that.
So I think the general spirit is when people build smaller things if they want, then we should eliminate those barriers.
Or-
I mean, the only downside, and some people do think this is a downside, is it accelerates the speed at which these big side yards are building. That we've had people comment, express concerns about that. That would be the counter.
Okay, but technically, we're not changing the side setbacks anyway, just the lot widths,
Right.
so. So I guess the side yards would potentially get smaller, but what's happening now is people just fill it in with big house. All right, so does anyone opposed to that idea? Yeah. Okay, so the other discussion was about driveways. We do allow bi-directional driveways in 5A and 5B, but not in 4A. Does anyone think we should allow bi-directional driveways in 4A?
We see our name here.
It's a wider cut across the sidewalk, and it's, you know, it can break up the rhythm of the street with the wide driveway.
Is that what the Saldo says? It's wider.
We actually require in the code apparently 22 feet width.
In the zoning code?
In
Or
the,
is that in the Saldo?
For a one way?
apparently it's in the saldo,
I think it might be in the Saldo.
24 feet wide actually for a 22-foot driveway width.
Generally, that can be addressed through a waiver.
The width,
Which we've done before.
Forget.
right?
I mean, that would all be part of conditional use review. And again, that would be for properties that are being developed.
I mean, I think that the number of properties that would actually end up potentially having a need for a driveway that large are not many in this district. So for me, having a two-way and only having one larger curb cut for that property is, I don't.
I mean, we could stipulate a two-way driveway is to reach an interior parking lot. Or you know, parking area as opposed to a house driveway, just to make sure we're not. If we don't want to have houses have double driveways.
I also think if it's in the saldo, it can be addressed through a waiver. That's not a very onerous process.
So you're saying that the applicant would just ask for a waiver to allow a two-way driveway, because they're not gonna get a letter from you that says they're allowed.
What they'll get is a letter of review that says this requires a waiver from council. And what that entails is instead of just drawing it on the plan and having it move through, someone asks the question, why do you need that waiver? they explain it, and then usually the waiver's given.
Kind of makes sense to change that requirement anyway, because there's so many driveways to apartment complexes that are narrower than that. And they're the only driveway. I'm thinking of Montgomery Court,
Mhm.
that's a very narrow
Okay.
driveway.
You're saying if it was up to you, you would not require the wide driveway,
Right,
but would allow a two-way driveway?
sure. I mean, they're just not that busy.
I think
I
it
mean,
depends
Montgomery Court is big.
on the visibility. It becomes,
Okay.
is it 22 for a two-way,
Yes.
Okay. which is,
The reasoning behind that must be just to allow. Makes sense.
I think the standard is, it's either 22 or 24, I thought, for a two-way drive aisle. So it probably just translated over to what the driveway size needs to be. I mean, I think it could be smaller, but if you can't see who's coming, then nothing poses an issue, so.
You have to
Having
back up.
Having it be a waiver where it's, show me on a plan that it works, where somebody could be coming down and you're not gonna have to back out onto the street with you. So. I don't think it's necessary to change the width. If a waiver could be granted.
Brian, what do you think?
That makes no sense.
Aaron? Do you agree?
David?
Right, David.
Sorry, yeah, I do.
Aaron's not here tonight. All right, so Heidi would be okay with changing it, but most
Yeah, it's either way. It's
people are saying that the idea is that there should be relief granted if it's
Yes.
deserved.
Yes.
But it's not clear if it should be codified that way or not.
I think waivers to driveway width requirements are quite common.
Well, so I think also I don't think we allow bi-directional driveways. So that's part of it. So I think in order to be consistent, if we want to say a bi-directional driveway, then that triggers the width requirement.
Right, but we also reduce them for one-way driveways, like 10 feet to 9 we commonly do that if someone, we just ask them, like, why do you want this? And they say, well, this is my lot size and all that, it's taking a long time.
Okay, but so but is anyone opposed to allowing by right development of two-way driveways to interior parking lots?
No.
Not to an interior.
I'm not opposed to the, allowing them, no. I think your idea is a good one, that it'd be like, you have to get access to a parking lot, not just your own garage. And I don't feel it's necessary to change the width because you can easily get a waiver.
Okay, so the sense of the commission is that 4A could allow bi-directional driveways.
Mhm.
And if the standard width is to an interior parking area and of more than 2 spaces
Yeah, for a multi-family,
for multifamily project, multifamily development.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, and then I'll come back to that, and then we're not changing any standards, but they can always apply for a waiver, in alternate dimensions. The only thing about when you mentioned the multifamily, and we were talking about rows earlier, so the majority of our row houses do not have parking off street. And so ironically, right, like if we were to put in 12, or let's say it would be like 8 row houses on Elmwood as a if somebody did that, which is not being proposed. If nobody provided any parking, right, there's only 2 or 3 street spaces, right? Maybe 3 or 4, right? So we wouldn't have 1 space per housing unit. the way to get some off-street parking for road development would be from the rear. So we would need a driveway, and the most efficient way to have a driveway to get to rear parking would be to have a shared driveway or multiple.
Okay, can we go back to the TOD idea that you don't need to have required parking?
We don't need to, I don't know if we, do we require parking for cottages off street? We do, don't we? We don't require at least one space.
Probably, yeah, because it has to do with rent units, housing units. But I'm just suggesting that we really should consider the parking requirement.
One thing that you guys can do, you don't require a parking space for ADUs, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
We don't now, yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose technically even the row houses could have ADU. It isn't, I mean, the parking adds cost, but if for the sake of argument, so I guess we could discuss a recommendation to lower the minimum, or to do away with the parking requirement, basically. You're not obligated to provide off-street parking for housing. Right?
Mhm.
Is anyone opposed to that?
It's refreshing,
I'm sorry, I missed what you were talking about, because I'm.
eliminating the parking requirements.
And Heidi, did you go, I think you said you went to a conference this month?
Yeah, it was great.
Was that discussed at the conference?
It was one of the there were 6 points this guy made, and I'm sorry, I don't know how long it's gonna be, but
Charles Marone?
yeah, one of them was to eliminate the parking requirement. The other was to eliminate lot line setbacks. Except for they were required for fire trucks and safety. Another one was to allow some multi-family housing as much as you want, you know. In your family homes or. I mean, there were a number of items that he addressed in order to make properties more affordable.
So, I didn't go to your the presentation, but zero lot lines are much more common in like new subdivisions than infill. So do you recall, was this like a general prescription or really just talking about?
They're talking about when you're talking about small towns and how they can build out. Things, you know,
In terms of eliminating parking requirement, any property that has enough curb space, like, in this can get an exemption from the parking. Right now, it's a convoluted calculation. It depends on the length of the curb and how much space is taken away from fire hydrants and things like that. You could potentially simplify that to make it easier. I mean, you have to have and you have to have a pretty small lot not to have enough space for a parking lot.
Well, I mean, I don't want to
Street parking.
be that difficult, but I think this distance is about 160 feet before not counting the shy distance from the intersection where you have to keep it open for the site triangle. So that's 8 spaces.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 actually, if you use 22 feet. So it's 7 spaces that you can get in front of 198 Elmwood if you have no driveway on Elmwood Avenue. Which is only, if it was 1 per unit, that's 7 units of curb parking. And it may be less than 7, I mean, I'm just, like, from memory, I think that's about how long the curb is. If you introduce a driveway, you lose another space or 2. So I think what's sort of being suggested is, just for the sake of argument, no one's proposing to build a block of 16-foot like wide row homes. But if somebody were to propose that, right, you would have at least 10 of them. I mean, the other thing is the setback. So I guess to work the problem in sequentially, according to the zone, the professional staff, we require a 35-foot setback from Narberth Avenue. I don't know why. The next door house is nowhere near 35 feet. And not from the street, 35 feet, I think from the property line. So, obviously that doesn't work, but so it's, if we say we're gonna do away with excessive setbacks, you know, even if you took it down to just like 7 feet or something, right? So you're dealing with like 100, I don't know, if we call it 180 feet minus 20 feet is 160 feet. So we can get 10 16-foot wide row houses approximately, maybe 9. It's an odd shaped lot. So 9 or 10. And we can, you know, and, you know, they could be developed without any parking, but the lot is deep enough that there's room in the back for some parking. Or I suppose you could develop the ADUs in the back without parking as well, in which case, if each row had one more ADU, just for the sake of argument, that's 16 housing units. 8 rows and 8 ADUs. In the rear.
Or stacked townhomes.
We did stacked townhomes, which would probably be 20 feet wide to get the stair. So we would probably get 7 of them. Yeah, 6 or 7 times 2, so 12 units. And plus any ADUs, maybe 14 to 16 total on the site. I think it's like a third of the neighborhood, so that's about 30 units.
Do we know how many cars there are in the borough? I mean, I know this parking study's been done. I'm just really curious how many renters there are and how many cars there are for renters.
40 to 45% are renting.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, so it's a significant percentage, and then,
How
I mean,
many?
I think you presented on the statistics, but like, I think I have it up somewhere. Like in terms of the census on how many cars there are, which it can be a little bit off. But 5% have no car, 1 vehicle is 45%, which is surprising to me. Only 2 vehicles are 43%, and 3 or more, 8%.
What year is that?
That's 2023, but again, there's some you know, they can be off. With a margin of error.
I thought it was more than 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
What I think I was noticing finding over time was this sort of barbell effect. There were more households having no cars than more households having a lot of cars. But there are a great number of households that have over 0 cars.
Yeah,
Yeah,
At least half the
Yeah, that's what I thought.
50% have
Yeah.
1 or 0 cars.
And you can assume there's some self-selection going on there. Those folks who are chasing through.
yeah.
So when you talk, I mean, maybe I missed your chain of reasoning. Are you talking about removing parking requirements everywhere in the 4A or just in the area near the train station?
Whoever put that on the table, or you propose.
Well, 4A is all in real estate.
Can you repeat the question?
Whether there's should be a part of your requirement in 4A. I think we should look at that a little bit more closely.
By the way, I calculated, and this could be wrong, but I calculated slightly over 3,000 vehicles in the borough. So we have you know, something like 4,400 residents. The residents live in households, so the vehicles are measured by households, not by residents, so.
That's true.
We have,
About 2,000 households.
yeah, 1,953, and then, of those, of households, 56% are owner occupied households. And 44% are renters. The owner occupied houses have, like, more than twice as many cars per house as the household as the renters do. So the owners are 1,000 people and they have 2,000 cars. Or 1,000 households with 2,000 cars. So two cars per household. And the renters are 858 households. You know, you can round it up to 900 if you want, but then they have a little over 1,000 cars, just about one per on average. Correct. But like we discussed, there's 1.2 for renters, 1.8 for owners, and the per household, but it's about 9% of renters have no car. So there's only 78 households, and then the majority, 63%, have one. Anyway, so
I guess the way I came at this before in most other districts in the borough is between allowing. First of all, most of these properties, because of the historic district ordinance, aren't going to be redeveloped. So in a way, if they want to add ADU, they don't need to park it. So for most of these areas, I think the parking requirement is moot. I think in addition, for many of them, they don't have to have parking already because of the funds, because of the credit of the current parking. So who does this impact? This impacts people who want to convert an existing structure to more dwelling units, right? Like you have a big house and you want to split it into 3 units. This could then affect you. Or if you are lucky enough to have a site you can build on, this would affect you. So the way I feel like with COVID, maybe the strategic thing to do is to focus on how having the parking requirements in those circumstances be managed better, as opposed to just sort of just blanket not having it.
I guess I worry that like, what's the right way to put this? Like as the projects get smaller in scale, having a requirement becomes nonsensical. Like you can't go lower than 1 parking space. So like if we allowed 16-foot wide lots, you can't get a parking space on street. So see, so you either require it or you don't, because you can't require a fractional parking space. So you understand what I'm saying? So it's related also to subdivision standards. If we wanted to, if you assume you're subdividing the lot, the other way to do townhomes though, or row houses would be essentially a condominium and a building footprint approach, which is to say you own your home, but the wouldn't have to necessarily cut it up into 16-foot wide strips. You have common things. Either way, I
Parking
mean,
down the block.
pardon?
Or parking down the block.
Or across the street or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, there just isn't really a lot of land to work with, right?
Nor are there going to be that many of these developments being built. I mean, I think that's the other thing we just have to keep remembering is there's not a whole lot of areas where we're going to allow dense construction. And I mean, unless we're subdividing houses into multiple units.
Which, for that argument, I think eliminating the parking is then part of the conversation of increasing density easily,
Yeah.
because that is a factor that's standing in the way of people considering that as an option.
What do they do in Lower Marion? Do they have parking requirements?
They
in Lower
do,
Marion?
they do.
Yeah,
Honestly, I'm finding more and more that Narberth is one of the most progressive places in Montgomery County, with respect to these things, so.
Well, like with multifamily houses. One thing, a possible way to approach this would be like we do with. With apartment buildings, there is, they like, you want to, divide your large single detached house, which has one unit now, you can turn it into a multifamily house with 3 units in it. We'll waive the parking requirement for any unit under 750 people. If you want to build a 2,000 square foot unit, you need to park it. So you have the double advantage of encouraging conversions, but encouraging small units. And we already do that in our code. We give preferential parking for smaller units already.
So read back, what is the proposal?
It is to waive parking requirements. Well, let's see. I was trying to, so in situations where a person would like to convert a detached house with 1 or 2 units in it into a multifamily house with more than that many units in it. The parking requirements would be waived for units that are less than 750 square feet. In addition to allowing the curbside parking credits. Which means, take a multifamily house, it's 5 units matters, which means you can create a 5-unit multifamily house with 1 large unit and 4 small units, and you wouldn't have to have any parking spots. It's a little more tailored than just simply getting rid of all the parking requirements. I think that would go, I think it would go better around here. But it's just like
as conversions, but it doesn't address.
right, so I'm just sort of trying to think about how you address the situations that are like.
For new development, we could apply the same language that we were recommending in the 5 feet. With
Certainly-
affordable units, not requiring parking and,
You certainly said any unit under 750 feet anywhere, but it's a
Right.
cottage or twin.
right,
You see, that's gonna correlate, it's more likely to correlate with those households that
Right.
says telling us to don't have cars to begin with.
Well, the census doesn't, it just says, well, I don't know if we can break it down that way, but,
And I think with the narrative there is like, we're giving breaks to people who do want to build smaller units, which tend to be less expensive, or people who want to build affordable units. We're not giving breaks to people who want to build 2,500 square foot luxury apartments.
okay, so,
Low income Penn retirees, you know, that's.
well, they probably would provide parking anyway, but the proposal is to waive parking for units under 750 square feet or for income restricted affordable housing.
Yeah.
So anything 750 or less. And anything income restricted for affordability
Right, and ADUs.
and ADUs, right, which are already exempt.
They already are exempt, yeah, but this is whole package of this kind of housing, which,
So if you build something small, if you have small units are exempt and ADUs and affordable units
right,
would be exempt from the parking requirement.
and really. I mean, I feel like this is probably pretty sound for 3B, 3C, one of the 3B people will talk about like. To think.
no,
But it's a pretty sound policy for most of it, so not just for that, I think. I think that solves a big problem of conversions of houses. You still have the problem of new development, and you also have the problem of what in other communities is called like missing middle housing, which I think might imply not just like small units for singles, but maybe starter units for families or things like that, like, you know, a couple who's having a baby or something like that. It's a kind of a middle.
Isn't that where the not allowing multiple entrances comes into play, restricting those types of housing?
Well, guys, for the discussion, if we could try to keep it to one thing at a time, just for, to document it. But I think that, so we just stay with parking for a second, and what you're, because you just introduced, like, what housing are we trying to encourage? So one idea is small units are less expensive, but if we're talking about starter family units, I think we can distinguish too between ownership and rentals, because it's, you know, because that is a complicated topic. It's about like whether something is offered for sale, because even many of our single family detached homes are rented, they're not necessarily owned. But if you are considering having a child, I think there's a developer in Philadelphia, what is he like? I think he calls it baby maybe apartments. You need to have 2 bedrooms. And so you're probably over 7.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think of the, rather than just like, get rid of parking requirements, I'm trying to think of like, what are the niches that are likely to happen or that we want to encourage. One of them is small, you know, houses with small apartments in them. Another one is big new developments like on the Citizens Bank lot or septic parking lot, or one that you know would. Third is, which
Okay, so
first is like the maybe missing middle. whatever.
So I mean, if you want to continue to so I think Charles Marone, according to Heidi at the conference, is sort of saying, all of you small towns, I'm paraphrasing what you said here, right? But like, just get rid of all the regulation because you need let people do their thing, right? And you will reap the benefits because in fact, you'll get the tax base, you'll get the population, you'll get the people will be able to build what they need, right? But if we wanted to continue to require parking, because of course you will provide it anyway, but we could lower it from 1 to something less. So you're still saying, I want you to provide some off-street parking for an apartment building, for example, but maybe not require so many spaces. Because fundamentally, the issue is we just don't have large parcels. So we just can't fit very many cars off the street. It just isn't physically possible. No, I think the most you can fit, the most off-street parking you can possibly fit on like the 198 Elmwood without paving the entire lot. But if you stick to like a 60% sort of, 50% impervious coverage and 60% coverage, whatever, like it's 20 spaces tops. And probably a little less, so.
I feel like you got, what's 30 units? It's 20 parking spots. The visitor parking was an easy one to deal with. So say 30 units, you can get rid of 6 spots with curbside parking. Which means you have 26. You can build smaller income restricted units that you can eliminate. I mean, you can easily get your parking need out to 20 or below pretty easily. You can build small units, affordable units, or so. So, yeah, what I wouldn't want to do is like get rid of parking requirements and have people come in and build buildings like they own, which are all like high-end apartments. And I don't think it's a fair trade-off for the public.
But the complaint that the owner of the home has is he wants more parking than he has, because it actually is high-end owners want to have the automobile available. And there was, in Eclipse today, like New York, we probably need to get there as planners, right? But a huge number of vehicles in New York City don't move. They just stay on the curb. They're only available like if people want to go to the Hudson Valley for the weekend, so they're not using them otherwise.
70% of people.
Yeah, so they're just taking up space and then they're not charging to use the curb spaces. So to park off street, you're paying these exorbitant garage fees, but to park on street is free. So you have all these people storing their automobiles and they don't move them, right, just week after week, so. Whereas people that do need to use their car to, for whatever reason, work, shopping or whatever, you know, can't find anywhere to park, because people just sort of. So that in a way, they have a transportation problem where what people need is a recreational vehicle that's shared, or, you know, because they're just taking out valuable right away with it. Anyway, I digress, so if we were even to lower it from 1 to 0.7, just gives you a little more flexibility on how many housing units you can fit on a project, basically. And I personally think that in 4A, like, there is the train station parking lot, which is not full at night, it's completely empty. I think someday people are gonna figure that out and figure out how to share that lot, I don't know, you know, but
What people do you mean?
probably SEPTA.
Cause they've kind of tightened their rules, haven't they? Like now you have to pay whatever you use the lot.
Yes,
Yeah, but it's $2.
$2 for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even your visitors, you know, could pay, could pay
$16 a month to park your car.
yeah. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
when you
If
think about
folks are listening on, you can park your car. $60 a month. Is that the parking?
I don't, it's free on weekends.
But it also says for customers only.
It does, yeah, I think, anyway.
They're not vetting, they don't have, their apps don't match, so they can't, there's no way to
But
check.
there's an underlying point though, Adam, that is a good one, which is that zoning and parking requirements can only go so far in rationalizing the use of parking in a town, right? So for example, the curbside parking, although the person whose house fronts the curb, you know, often uses it, is not owned by that person, it's a public good. You know, SEPTA has a lot which sometimes is not fully optimized, you know? And really, probably ways to kind of address parking more efficiently through strategies besides zoning. Which is a shame, because that's really the one thing we can talk about here is zoning. But the solutions to parking can't all ride on the back of zoning, I think. And it's also tricky because I think, you know, the long-term trend probably will be for less use of cars, but it will take a while for that to wind its way through the system. For people to self-select and move to places where they need cars and so forth and so on. So we do have to be cognizant of, you know, while we're trying to think about the future, we do have to be cognizant of the time it takes to get there. So maybe reducing the ratios like you're talking about is a good interim step, as opposed to simply reducing. I mean, eliminating.
Okay, so you're saying maybe reduce the ratio. Ralph has his hand up. Ralph, did you still want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the 4A parking question. So one scenario that we didn't talk about is that there are some people who have home businesses in 4A that are required to have parking. And I didn't know if that would fall under the purview of what we were talking about, because we were mostly talking about residential parking.
You know, like dentists and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. So currently, I think they're required to have off-street parking for patients.
Yeah, I think we should, I personally don't think we should be requiring street parking.
I mean, that would mean a change, and that's something that maybe we can look into.
Okay, so Todd just basically, let me read back, okay? The sense of the commission is that we would waive parking for small units, 750 or less square footage, ADUs, income restricted or affordable housing, and we could potentially lower the base parking rate to 0.7, which matches our recommendation for 5 feet. That's like 0.7 spaces per housing unit. for multifamily and, I think we should waive it, you know. Does anyone, I mean, like, for, if, I feel like townhomes should, or row houses should not be required to, well, provide off-street parking at all. So I don't think it's actually necessarily feasible. Because I think that in reality, the market is going, if the market needs parking, the developer's gonna propose it. To build a project. But,
I mean, a row house could have a garage.
but not facing the street. In our code. That's why I do think like we could have a drive, essentially, this was a price court or whatever, they're built over the garages, but if we had a alley behind the houses, that's where we can park it.
Mhm.
And like 198 Elmwood is perfect for that, because the grade would allow you to tuck the parking in the basement.
Right.
Thinking about the row houses.
Okay, well, and I don't even know how it works with row houses with if they're treated as individual structures from a permitting perspective. It's not feasible to require off-street parking, allow the garage. I mean, my sense is like, essentially, the people are saying like, we're overthinking this, right? Let the private sector do its thing.
Right, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think maybe don't eliminate all parking requirements, but allow some flexibility so that if someone wants to come in and do something that's a little bit more dense, that would be allowed.
I mean, to break it down, Todd, like, if you, like, to say, like, if you wanna do row houses, we're not gonna require parking, but you can, if you can figure out how to provide it within the code, go ahead. I think we still have some work to do on how that works, because it has to be rear-loaded driveways, right? We don't allow front-loaded parking for rows. But so just forget it for rows, and they may not be 750 square feet, but it's the most affordable single-family house type to construct, probably. And then I think we could even say like, we could have duplexed row housing, which would double the density, right? Not quite double it, but almost double it, because I like it to last thing setbacks before we break tonight. And then for apartment buildings, if we lower it to 0.7, we're sort of saying, for every 30 apartments, you provide 20 parking spaces, something like that. So you're not off the hook completely for off-street parking, but you don't have, you can get more units out of a parcel. Whatever the carrying capacity is of your parking, you get essentially 30% more housing than you do on a one-to-one basis. And we could exempt the small units, which kind of gets to the same point, but it's just more of the same idea. Like if you have small apartments, they could be exempted. It doesn't mean that people with small units don't have cars, really. It's just a way of saying that you're going to have less parking and you're going to have a system for who is going to pay to use it. And it may be the person that has the small house doesn't have a car, but if they pay for the parking space, they pay for the parking space. Maybe unit doesn't have a car. So, I mean, Todd, would you be comfortable with the 0.7 just to match 5B or not?
Sure, yeah.
All right. That might be good enough for tonight. And then, so then for Ralph brought up, what about accessory commercial in this zone? Because I don't think we allow primary commercial. I have to check. I mean, can we just waive the parking?
We might in some places in the 4A, because there's some provisions So back when the form-based code was passed, the housing market was nothing like it is now. And there's concern that some of those beautiful houses, like particularly in Windsor Avenue, which have had different kinds of lives in the past, might go by the wayside. And so we do allow, like on corners or some of those buildings, to be used solely for professional use, I believe. That was just a way of allowing for more economic uses that would prolong the life of the building. So you have the dentist office on the corner. I'm gonna think the dentist is there too. We may actually, I think I see Michael Rodini with someone called, he loves the idea of corner stores and things like that. So I feel like we may allow in some of those areas, in some of those buildings, for them to be all commercial. But the question is whether you have like commercial grade parking requirements.
Well, even in downtown, so at 5A, we just exempt the first, 1,500 square feet or something from 2,500, so. From requiring parking.
I mean, that's definitely a tool to consider.
I feel like there's a natural sharing going on here too, where, well, I guess if you do your grocery shopping in the middle of the day, someone might take your parking space, but like at night, the businesses will be closed. The only people parking will be residents.
I guess that's something I would prefer to talk about some other because I don't really even know offhand what the parking requirements are.
All right, so-
or what exactly is allowed.
Let's say that we'll come back to that
A
base.
lot allowed. Well, the
Yes,
conditional use
Like
business
either a special exception or conditional.
is a conditional uses, and it's most of them are allowed.
Right, just like different buildings or
Yeah.
something like that.
But could we require parking as part of the conditional use if it conditionally needed it?
Well, I wonder how you would prove things one way or the other.
Are we allowed to waive the parking requirement?
Not, I don't think you can waive zoning requirements. You can waive requirements.
All right, well, we're pretty much, we can't devote too much more time to this topic, so. If we're not sure what to say yet, we can say it may be worth considering further.
I think that's a good.
Yeah, I think it's a good talking.
There's just a lot that's allowed in.
Yeah.
And some of them we may want to require parking based on what they are.
All right, so one more topic is the setbacks, and so again, we don't have that many sites under development, but in theory, some of these other sites could be redeveloped at some point. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely. The 190 Elmwood, as we discussed, has a 35-foot setback according to the review letter on Margaret Avenue. And
We understand it's.
yeah. Right, well, but the zoning was even 25 feet before, which is 25 feet of grass.
I'm not sure that was the case on Margaret Avenue.
Pardon?
I'm not sure that was the case on Margaret Avenue.
I think it was keeping with the setback along that.
It's also a corner lot, so it's like it has to
Pretty
do with.
standard.
I think I could be misreading it, but I think too with our corner lots, we sort of require you to have almost two fronts. And so Elmwood is 25 feet, and I think the original plan had 25 feet on Elmwood and 25 feet on Harvard, per the zoning. But I guess what I would be interested in floating for discussion is the following, something along the following, which is to say that the minimum setback would be 10 feet on street.
Well, not from the street. I think you need to set back from the street.
No, it's 10 feet from the lot line on street frontages, because it's 7 feet on non-street frontages, and then except that where you have an existing house line, you would carry that house line average setback of existing structures, within 150 feet of your property for at least 25 feet, continuing that line. But not necessarily holding it for, and I'll just tell you like what that means as a practical matter is that if you already have a house line, you are respecting it. But what's interesting about this particular parcel is it turns the corner, so the house line doesn't really turn, because it's a line. So it gives you the opportunity to reset the setback to something else. And there are a lot of 25-foot setbacks, or even greater in some cases in Narberth, and there are other setbacks that are less. And there's not really a mathematical reason for any of it. It's just the way what looked good to the people that built it. So I think we talked about last time, this church structure, mixed-use structure, has a range of different setbacks, but they're not necessarily 25 feet. That's just one example. So some anyway, so some setbacks are significant, but you're also dealing with major height differences on the lot, like up to 15 feet from the street. So the idea being that, again, like if you force the buildings back from the curb, then the rear of the lot is constricted, no backyard. So if we're trying to put the parking behind the structures, we run out of backyard because we have the front yard. And I think it's reinforcing a very suburban character, or I don't even know if suburban is the right word, but I think what you're really looking for is street trees and gracious sidewalks and flowers, not so much grass. Regardless, 35 feet is too much, right? So at least we'll at least be 25 feet. That would be what the original project was, and then I think we would get better results with like 10 feet to be honest. Like just move the building closer to the street.
This is. So I think that rule has to do with front yard setbacks by block, South Narberth Avenue. 100 block, west side is 35 feet. Right?
Yes,
That's
you're right.
However, I thought there was also a provision that if there's only like one, the only data point in that house would be in that status, that would be the house next door. Yeah, there's only one other property that's not one of that. I thought also there was some sort of exception that if there's only like one data point, that didn't follow.
I seem to remember that too.
Anyway, so that's the origin of that rule, right? The origin of that rule is on a corner lot, you have to treat the side yard as if it were the front yard on the side street, on the other street, right? And that happens to have a pretty deep setback in that block. That's because there's only one other house. That also seems to me that house is not 35 feet away, even if you were to keep. Can you call that back Ariel? Does that Ariel have a house next door?
Yeah, hold on a second.
I think this is a little bit of a. Well, we're trying to figure out how to fix it, right?
Yeah. This is the house. Well, and it varies, it's it's about, well, it's also, I don't know exactly where the parcel line is. It's probably like only 15 to 20 feet from the parcel line, depending on where the parcel line is, and maybe up to 20. But then it's further from the back because, of course, these are not regularly shaped lots. So its average setback may be 25 feet. Its minimum setback may be 20.
Yeah, I think this factor here is that setback for that block is just measured wrong.
But so the thing about this to me, like, I mean, I am a resident of Elmwood Avenue, further down the block, and I mean, it is, there, you know, there are front yards and I have front yard and so on, but, and you can see that this building has the 25-foot setback, the woodside court. You go across the bridge and we have 0 setback. And this is a residential building now. These are mixed use, and, you know, so essentially, if we have a 25-foot setback on both sides of the street, we have 50 feet of grass in our Narberth Avenue right of way.
Not bad.
Well, this is grass.
Doesn't have to be grass, but.
It doesn't have, no, it doesn't have to be grass. I mean, it absolutely doesn't have to be, but what is it?
On the
Green
east,
space.
on the east side of the street, the median setback is supposed to be 44 feet, which is clearly,
Well, maybe from the curb, let's see,
I guess they're measuring the kind of,
it's about 35 from the curb. Then maybe the other side is based on 35 from the curb on this side. So, you know, you're dealing with, it's probably a 25-foot setback from the lot line. And that is pretty consistent, I think, I think that might have been some zoning code from the 50s.
wow, that's like why that is, I don't know. The current rule is in that east block, the median setback is 44 feet, so that's the required setback. And on the west side, it's 35 feet, that's the required setback. Setbacks are contextual. Neither of those measurements seems correct to me, to be honest with
I don't think they are. But on that particular block. And then even the street is running at a diagonal, so you're getting trapezoidal parcels.
you. The next block actually doesn't matter because each block has its own calculation.
Yeah, well, they're not 35 and 45.
Yeah. So bottom line is, it seems silly to me. That setback seems way silly, and it feels to me like it's a function of the setbacks being measured wrong. And you could even argue if that house is a Dutch colonial, its front is on Elmwood, or excuse me, on Woodside, not on Yarmouth. Technically. Wonder what that address is for that house. What I'm trying to say is it may not be a flaw in the code, but as much as it is a flaw in the measurements that apply to that copy of the code.
It actually, I think it does address Narberth Avenue, even though architecturally it could be either, but it's, anyway.
It's just that's really cool.
Jeffrey?
Everyone's there.
I want to also just call your attention to this is the Marion, the garden apartments at Marion, which interestingly has, I think, an underground parking garage underneath their courtyard or under the building. It's like probably, you know, Model T era, you know, small, you know, well, 20s or whatever. But you can see here what I'm sort of talking about, like where the rear and side setbacks are small. You know, they're just like 10 feet, 7 feet, whatever they are. The building, you know, and it's up against the lowest of single family homes, because that's not a historic house. It's like a ranch style house. So you have the highest building, the tallest building in the area, next to the shortest building in the area, with both of them having the minimum setback you can possibly have for the side lot line. And then on this street, the setback is as little as almost nothing. So they have essentially a 3.5 story apartment building, we'll call it 3 on a base, up against the sidewalk, and then they have this sort of landscape courtyard that all of the apartments face onto. Then the street winds around, and then you again have this sort of variable front, but it's as close to the curb as, you know, 8 feet. There's no sidewalk on that side. But it's just, there's precedent for garden apartments and for apartment buildings to be built with much less setback. And also to, you know, in essentially, this is a very prosperous single family neighborhood. That's just an example, like, I mean, again, it's about the architecture, so that's not necessarily easy to control with the zoning, but I think that we sort of mitigate for architectural quality by pushing buildings away from the street as just a way of compensating. But this lot, I think I did a setback study, I can just show you real quickly, So let's see. This is the lot traced over kind of an aerial photo. And these are different setback lines, so I think it's, 5 feet and 7 feet and, no, I don't know, actually it's more than that. But this is that 35-foot setback, just for the sake of argument. I think this is the 25-foot setback. But you don't have a lot of space left if you have these large setbacks to work with. And then this was my attempt to just do the carrying capacity of the lot. So like if you, where is this? This is a single driveway, probably should be even a little wider with about 20 parking spaces. With a 7-foot, doesn't get within 7 feet of the lot. And then this is where you're gonna put your storm water, is in the corner, which is where they had it.
So you really just asked about the setback. It seems to me there's something off in the way. It seems like there's something off in the calculations, which leads to this result of the 35-foot setback, which just seems wrong. It just seems wrong. I don't feel like that needs to be a 35-foot setback. But I also am not sure that means we need to totally rewrite the zoning in the 4A district. It feels to me like a better route, and maybe more robust, to be honest with you, would be to accelerate the thinking about what would a PUD process look for a site like this. I mean, it's like a 5-sided site, got weird streets that bend, elevations. I mean, you can almost not write a code for this in the traditional sense, because it's such an unusual site. So rather than try to rewrite or a district so this site will work, why not just create the PUD recommendation now?
Okay, well, that's one idea. I'll just throw out there that I think we require 25 feet. In a lot of places? Is that right? Yeah. We can try to address it with the PUD if we don't know that that's going to be feasible, like whether that would be entertained, but
If you look at the median setbacks across those blocks, it's pretty high.
they are often 25 feet, but they are not always 25 feet. And it's just that when we talk about what mostly exists, when we talk about single family houses, they're not providing very much off-street parking. You can have these huge setbacks if you don't require parking or you don't provide it. It's just that when you push the buildings back into the lot, then the rear of the lot will not be available for parking. Unless you do a garage under the building, which just, when we're talking about affordability, it just doesn't work. Garage parking is gonna be unaffordable, period. So we can table it for now, but it just geometrically, we don't have the depth to do everything with those parcels. To have a big front yard and
Most parcels we can't do anything with because of the historic district ordinance. We only have to worry about parcels that the kind of changes that will likely be to happen. And those are the very few spots which are developable, many of which or like this, it could probably be much more easily done with PUD and other properties where the structure would be made. But the interior configuration would change to include more units. And really, that's the only changes that we're gonna see. And so for the most part, as with what the setbacks are is not gonna come into play. 'Cause if I'm gonna convert my house from 1 unit to 3, I'm not gonna change my setback. So they don't, if you were to scrape the whole road clean and then rebuild it, yeah, maybe a 34-foot setback or 50-foot doesn't make sense, but that's not what's gonna happen.
I mean, we can't be talking about tonight, but like, just for the hypothetical, what you're saying is that our current zoning would require it, just for the sake of argument, if the train station were to be replaced in part by, an apartment building, for example, you would force that building 25 feet back from
No, I
Melville.
think the PUD type answer is better, where you can do more tailored site planning. Because those sites, it's almost impossible to get a code that will apply to all those sites and the little sites and everything else. So I think those are kind of so unique that the better way to deal with them is to craft I'm hoping it's possible under state law, that kind of process that allows more flexible safety.
Okay, well, we'll say that at a minimum, there's a consensus that 35 foot is not correct, and it's probably more like 25 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I think within that, like if you were to establish minimum standards of PUD, I think they'd be far less.
And, okay, and then it's
However,
possible that it could be less, but we don't necessarily have a process to get there right now.
Well, it was set up to be, as was said, contextual. So when you're looking down the street, there is nothing that's jutting out in front of the general line of setbacks. And it's also to allow space for street trees. I mean, I think that's very important. So you don't want to come right up to the sidewalk in what's a more residential neighborhood. I mean, there's a reason why the buildings in the downtown are on the sidewalk. It's because that's an urban environment, more of an urban shopping district. The street trees are in the sidewalk.
Sidewalks are larger too, 10 feet.
Right. It's a whole different requirement. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with our current form zoning code. It says it's the setback of the mean setback of the houses on the street. That should be retained. And there's no reason why you can't eliminate the setbacks in the rear and on the sides, but keep them in the front so that you maintain that space for street trees. I don't know why we're talking, I don't know why we think we need to change it. That's all I'm saying. Like, just, that part of it should be left alone. Driveway widths can change, setbacks in the rears can change. If we look at that and find out they're too much. Minimum lot height, housing.
But Henry, would you,
Can change.
what would you think about the statement that there are some sites like this one at Elmwood, right? Like the one at the SEPTA lot, or say the American, the Christ House, I remember that one on Montgomery Avenue, that are just so unique that it's almost impossible to treat them through standard.
Yeah, but that conforms to the setbacks,
What does?
the price,
No, like the redevelopment of that, it's this back of the site to be developed,
yeah.
that it's such an unusual site that it would be better to approach it through something like a PUD process.
Oh, that's fine, no, absolutely, but I'm just saying, let's not change the front yard setbacks. I don't think we should change that, but yes, we could look at every site individually, but there ought to be some requirements that we want to know about coming into it.
I mean, we just may not have like a tool agreement on everything, because the, part of it is like, we're saying on this particular lot, for example, what we're saying is you have to set back from both streets 25 feet.
I don't know what, if 25 is the number.
Well, that's what the code
I mean,
requires.
if that's what, but Todd's chart says that it's more than that, then that's where we think that might be wrong. I don't know what.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, it's like, it's, a lesser number is like potentially a better number, but and I'm highly sensitive to aesthetics, but it's also just like, I mean, even looking at corner house lots in 4A, right? They, I'm not sure if this is 4A or if it's just outside of it, but you can see how this is there's, the front yard is deeper than the side yard in this case. This is a big house, but they could have built a smaller house with a bigger yard on both sides, but they didn't. And this line doesn't continue, right? Like there's tons of irregularities in the borough today. There's lots of consistency, and then there's inconsistency.
Well, it's, again, the farm zoning code, I believe, says it's an average. Yeah, so some are closer, some are farther. I don't think you want to encourage right on the sidewalk or too close to the sidewalk. If it's not sort of the look of the street already. And that apartment building you showed next to the Marion train station, I don't think that's good.
You don't think it's good?
I don't think that's good the way it's right on the sidewalk either. That should have some trees to buffer it. Or right next to that little one-story house.
I don't know, I think it's pretty successful design.
Yeah. Well, that building itself is an old, interesting building.
All right, well, at a minimum, we can say like, there may be some errors in the code table about setbacks on the block where it's just not listed correctly, and that, Todd's putting out there that ideally we would have a PUD process that allows you to deal with irregular sites or come up with, hybrid solutions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if a developer wants to come up with a solution that works that site a little bit differently, that certainly should be okay.
I mean, for housing though, that's where it's like, we really don't have, as far as I can tell, very many developer sites. There's probably 3 or 4 in the entire borough. And so this is one of the 3 or 4.
Right.
And what I'm concerned about, and I remain concerned even after this conversation, is that the setback lines take something like 20 to 30%, 25 to 30% of the parcel and make it front yards.
Right. And maybe that's true, but rather than like redo all of 4A, why don't we look at the sites and come up with like I said, like a PUD process, which explores where we can have standards that are more suitable to how those sites can be redeveloped, but not change rules that affect the fabric of places in other parts of town. Like, I certainly wouldn't want that little house that was filled in on Dudley Avenue, like 104, 108 Dudley, to have been pushed 10 foot closer to the street than all the other houses in that very one block, just so they could put parking behind it.
Well, that's why I proposed earlier at the very beginning of this discussion some time ago, that we say we continue the house line of the neighboring house for a distance of 25 feet. And I mean, so it would allow you to break the line, but you wouldn't necessarily break it right at the next house that's already there to that point.
And with that dimension, a house that's in the middle of the block would ultimately be constrained to either side of who gets most blocks.
It would have to match its neighbors.
Right.
Right, I honestly don't know how much that gains you or loses you.
Depends how big your lot is, yeah.
Well, it depends on what your neighbors are like.
Right.
And I don't know what we're solving for, because of very few lots that can be built.
But that's just it. We're
what's-
going in circles, and I realize I shouldn't be abusing my privilege as chair, but it's frustrating because it's like we say, well, we don't want to have a small setback because what if somebody comes in and breaks the house line in a way that's intrusive? So we say,
I'm
well,
saying, why bother with the setbacks on Dudley Avenue or Elmwood Avenue for most of the stretches, because no one's gonna be able to build there anyway. Because we don't allow tear downs. What we do know is there are 4 or 5 potentially really developable lots where we have an opportunity to kind of catalyze development that we think is most important and useful to the borough now. So why don't we focus on those with a process that can deliver those, rather than worry about residential blocks and the houses next door? Because the first one is, that's not gonna happen a lot. It's not gonna result in major change. If those rules stay the same, we're not gonna like all of a sudden lose a huge opportunity. So rather than try and write a whole 4A code that solves the problem of 198 Elmwood, why don't we think about a strategy that can help us deal with 198 Elmwood and 710 Montgomery and the SEPTA lot and the lot behind Citizens Bank and whatever else lots are that we think are really right, which is probably a sort of a PUD process that has fewer and maybe more generous basic rules, but a lot of flexibility. And it can be everything, site planning, parking, and so forth. I think we've talked about in the areas established by the borough, you can't do tear downs. You know, what you might anticipate is this division of houses into smaller units, but we talked about how to deal with that with parking, so that's good. I feel like we should try to focus on addressing situations that we think are likely to come up, not that change rules through the whole district. In that will affect things that are like not likely to happen or not likely to deliver huge change. I mean, why go through the battle with all the blocks in there, with all the people in Norfolk about changing the way setbacks and residential blocks are measured if it's going to affect like 2 houses a year?
Right.
I mean, it's not worth it. It's
We
not going to
can
make that
wrap
much
this
of a
up
change.
anyway. It's getting late.
okay,
We should go
well,
to battles for these big lots.
what Todd seems to be recommending is that we explore the idea of a PUD overlay that allows for case by case creative solutions.
The big lots, but also explore rules that allow for subdivision or big houses and multiple units, which don't involve new development, they just involve reconfiguration of the house.
Yeah, so we talked through parking and for setbacks, we said that 35 is too much and it should be contextual and we'll measure that, but then there wasn't a consensus to do anything more than that right now, other than to pursue the few discussion. I'm a little worried that if that turns out to a dead end, that we are still not solving for the only parcels that we do have, but we can certainly look at PUDs. Which can address all of the above, not just, and I think we end up having to look at the solid anyway, just to figure out how to do townhouse development or roadhouse development in a modern context. Not sure that we're ready for that, so. All right, well, if there's nothing else, is there any public comment? I don't think there's anyone online. So then if there's nothing else to discuss tonight, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor of adjourning? Say aye. Aye. Motion carried. Thank you. Have a good night.